The marble floor of the United Earth Council chamber splintered with each deliberate step of High Commander Zexthal's crystalline legs. The emergency session, called just hours after the Cortaxian fleet's arrival, had descended into chaos the moment the alien commander materialized inside their allegedly secure facility. Security forces stood frozen, their weapons drawn but useless against a being whose very body seemed to bend light around it. Counselors of Earth, Zexthal's voice resonated through the chamber, each word creating sympathetic vibrations in the glass windows. I must admit to a certain disappointment. His upper limbs gestured at the holographic display spinning above the central podium, showing detailed scans of Earth's known space fleet. We have observed your species for decades, watching your brutal rise from planetary warfare to spaceflight. Your reputation for violence precedes you. The Council chamber's automated systems struggle to compensate for the crystalline commander's presence. Temperature regulators whined as they tried to deal with the cold radiating from his form, and the lighting automatically adjusted to handle the prismatic refractions cast by his body. Council President Helena Martinez found her voice first. High Commander, this is an unprecedented breach-off. Unprecedented. Zexthal's laugh sounded like breaking glass. What is truly unprecedented is the audacity of your species to claim status as a spacefaring civilization. He paused, his faceted head tilting as if in mock consideration. 30 capital ships. We expected more from the infamous humans. The holographic display expanded, showing the true scale of the Cortaxian armada now entering the solar system. Massive crystalline structures, each larger than Earth's moon, moved with impossible grace through the void. Their surfaces caught and reflected sunlight, creating an artificial constellation that was visible even from the planet's surface. Our anthropologists, Zexthal continued, moving closer to the Council's elevated seats, theorized that your limited fleet must be a deception. Surely, we thought, the species that fought 3 world wars, that turned their own planet into a battlefield countless times, would have built an armada worthy of their violent heritage. Martinez glanced at her fellow council members, seeing the same mix of fear and rage on their faces. Humanity had achieved peace, yes, but not by abandoning their capacity for war. Yet here was an alien force that made their greatest military achievements look like children's toys. What do you want? Martinez demanded, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Zexthal's body shifted colors, moving from deep purple to a bright, almost blinding white. Want? I want nothing from insects. I am here to inform you of your options. His form expanded, growing until his crystalline head nearly touched the chamber's vaulted ceiling. Surrender your fleet, what little there is of it, and accept your place as a protectorate of the Cortaxian Empire. Refuse, and we will demonstrate how truly insignificant your vessels are. The chamber erupted in shouts and arguments, but Zexthal raised a limb, and the sound simply stopped. Some technological marvel had muted every human voice in the room. You have 1 planetary rotation to decide, he announced. Though given the pitiful state of your defenses, I cannot fathom why you would need even that long to acknowledge the obvious. As suddenly as he had appeared, Zexthal began to fade from view. But his final words lingered in the air, each syllable dripping with contempt. Perhaps if you had built proper warships instead of these toys, we might have considered you worthy of actual diplomatic exchange. But then again, size does matter. The moment the alien commander fully dematerialized, sound returned to the chamber. But instead of chaos, a heavy silence fell over the assembled leaders of Earth. Through the chamber's windows, they could see the Cortaxian fleet's reflection on the moon's surface, a reminder of the impossible odds they faced. What none of them saw, however, was President Martinez's slight smile as she sent a single encoded quantum burst transmission. Wasp's nest is kicked. Let them learn why hornets don't need to be giants. Deep beneath the churning geothermal vents of Yellowstone, Admiral Jessica "Wasp" Thompson watched the Council broadcast with a predatory grin. The massive underground command center, known officially as the Hive, hummed with activity as thousands of operators maintained quantum links with Earth's real fleet. "Cocky bastard, isn't he?" her XO, Commander Marcus Rivera, muttered as they watched Zexthal's performance replay on the main screen. "All the talk about size. Compensating for something, you think?" Jessica snorted, her weathered face crinkling with amusement. At 5'4", she'd spent her entire military career dealing with people who underestimated her based on size. Now an alien civilization was making the same mistake on a cosmic scale. "Status report," she barked, and the massive holographic display shifted to show the real state of Earth's defense network. Thousands of green dots populated the solar system map, each one representing a ship no larger than a 20th-century fighter jet. They lurked in asteroid fields, rode solar wind currents, and hid within the storms of gas giants. "All Mosquito-class vessels report ready," Admiral Rivera confirmed. "Quantum drives are sensed and stealth systems are holding." The Cortaxians still think they're reading space debris. Jessica walked through the hologram, her small frame passing through the dots representing her fleet. These ships were her brainchild, the culmination of humanity's realization that bigger wasn't always better. While other species built ever larger warships, Earth had gone microscopic. "Show me the Thunderbolt formations," she ordered. The display zoomed in on Jupiter, where hundreds of ships had hidden themselves within the Great Red Spot. The massive storm provided perfect cover for their quantum signatures. "Ma'am," a young lieutenant called out, "quantum analysis of the Cortaxian fleet is complete. Their crystal-based technology has a structural resonance frequency we can exploit. Our calculations suggest their shields will be virtually blind to anything smaller than a destroyer." Jessica's grin widened. "They built their entire civilization around being big," she mused. "Their sensors, their weapons, their tactics, all designed to fight enemies of equal or greater size. They never considered that someone would go smaller." The command center's lights dimmed briefly as a particularly strong geothermal surge passed through the surrounding rock. These underground bases were another example of humanity's new philosophy. Hide in plain sight, stay small, strike from unexpected angles. "Message from President Martinez, ma'am," Rivera announced. "The Council is ready to proceed with Operation Hornet's Nest." Jessica straightened her uniform, running a hand through her silver-streaked hair. "Put me through to the fleet," she ordered. The quantum comm system activated, connecting her to thousands of pilots waiting throughout the solar system. "Men and women of Earth's Defense Force," she began, her voice carried instantly across vast distances through quantum entanglement. "The enemy at our door believes that size equals strength. They look at our ships and see insects." She paused, letting that sink in. "But they forgot something crucial about Earth's insects. The smaller they are, the deadlier they tend to be." Throughout the solar system, pilots in their compact ships listened intently. These vessels, cramped but lethal, represented humanity's greatest technological achievement. Quantum drives allowed them to slip through space like ghost particles, while their small size made them nearly impossible to target with conventional weapons. "In precisely 1 hour," Jessica continued, "the Cortaxians expect us to surrender our 30 capital ships and accept their dominion. Instead, they're going to learn why Earth never bothered building moon-sized vessels." She checked the tactical display one final time. "We're going to show them why wasps don't need to be giants to bring down their prey." The command center erupted in focused activity as final preparations began. Jessica watched the Cortaxian fleet through the tactical display, their massive ships glittering like arrogant jewels in space. Soon those same ships would learn the true meaning of insignificant. "All wings, prepare for quantum sync," she ordered. "Let's remind the galaxy why size isn't everything." The first Cortaxian strike came exactly as predicted. A warning shot that could have obliterated Earth's entire known fleet. A massive crystalline vessel, shaped like a jagged arrowhead, unleashed a beam of energy that could have boiled Earth's oceans. Instead, it carved through empty space where satellite intelligence had suggested Earth's capital ships were stationed. Immediate combat analysis, High Commander Zexthal demanded from his flagship's bridge, his crystalline form pulsing with anticipation. "Show me the devastation." "Sir," his sensor officer's voice wavered. There's no debris field, no wreckage, no radiation signatures consistent with destroyed vessels." Before Zexthal could process this information, his fleet's sensor arrays exploded with new contacts. Not dozens, not hundreds, but thousands of quantum signatures suddenly blazed to life throughout the solar system. Like dust motes catching sunlight, tiny vessels seemed to materialize from nowhere. "Impossible," Zexthal whispered, watching as swarms of human ships, each no larger than his flagship's waste disposal units, emerged from their hiding places. They rose from asteroid fields like disturbed insects, poured out of gas giant storms like angry hornets, and detached from comets like awakening parasites. In her quantum-shielded cockpit, Captain Sarah Rodriguez led the first trike wave from Jupiter's orbit. "Remember your training," she broadcast to her wing. Pattern Sigma 3 hit their sensor arrays first, then weapons systems, like carving a turkey, piece by piece. The human vessels moved in ways that defied traditional space combat doctrine. Their quantum drives didn't just propel them. They partially phased the ships out of normal spacetime, making them flicker in and out of standard sensor ranges. To the Cortaxian targeting systems, calibrated for capital ship combat, tracking these vessels was like trying to shoot individual raindrops in a storm. "They're inside our shield perimeters," a Cortaxian officer screamed over the fleet-wide channel. "How?" "Our barriers are rated for." "Rated for capital ships," Jessica Thompson's voice cut through every Cortaxian command frequency. "You built walls to stop giants, Commander Zexthal. But you forgot about the ants." The first casualty was a Cortaxian destroyer. Sarah's wing dove through its shields as if they weren't there, their quantum signatures too small to trigger the barrier's resistance. They emerged inside the crystalline vessel's structure itself, their engines' resonance frequencies shattering crucial systems from within. "Like I told my kids," Sarah muttered as she guided her ship through crystalline corridors barely wider than her vessel. "Sometimes the best path is straight through the wall." Across the solar system, the pattern repeated. Humanity's microfleet struck from impossible angles, appearing inside sealed compartments, emerging from quantum shifts within weapon housings, and materializing through supposedly impenetrable shields. The Cortaxian fleet, designed to wage war against equals, found itself fighting shadows. "Status report," Zexthal demanded as his flagship shuddered. The massive vessel's crystal structure sang with dangerous harmonics as human ships phased through its hull, their quantum drives tuned to frequencies that threatened to shatter his entire command center. 30% of the fleet reports critical systems failure, his second-in-command reported, fear evident in his crystalline resonance. "Their weapons, they're not attacking our ships, sir. They're attacking from inside them." From her command center, Admiral Thompson watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Cortaxian fleet's formation was breaking down, their mighty ships trying desperately to target enemies they could barely detect. It was like watching a great bear thrashing at a swarm of wasps, all its strength useless against such small, agile opponents. "Send in the second wave," she ordered. "Let's remind them why Earth's most dangerous creatures have always been the ones you need a microscope to see." As the battle raged on, a truth became clear to both sides. In their arrogance to build bigger, stronger ships, the Cortaxians had forgotten one of warfare's most fundamental lessons. Sometimes the deadliest predator is the one you never see coming. High Commander Zexthal's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained rage as he watched another destroyer shatter from within. His command staff huddled around failing holographic displays, their forms dulled with growing terror as reports flooded in from across the solar system. "Sir," his tactical officer's voice cracked like stressed crystal, "we've lost contact with the entire 7th Battle Group. Last transmission indicated human vessels were manifesting inside their quantum cores. Impossible. Zexthal's roar shattered several nearby displays. No species can survive quantum core exposure. The energy levels alone. They're not surviving it. Sir, his science officer interrupted, projecting analysis data. They're surfing it. Somehow their quantum drives are allowing them to ride the energy waves. They're using our own power sources as highways through our ships. On the main display, footage from a dying cruiser showed the human tactics in horrifying detail. Their tiny ships would phase through the hull, their quantum signatures perfectly matched to slip between the crystalline lattice of Cortaxian technology. Once inside, they became living torpedoes, their engines tuned to frequencies that turned the ship's own structure against itself. Magnify Sector 7. Zexthal commanded, watching as a swarm of human vessels emerged from the wreckage of one of his finest battleships. Like parasites abandoning a dead host, they immediately targeted the nearest intact vessel, repeating their lethal process. New tactical analysis, his combat AI announced. Human vessels are demonstrating impossible maneuverability. Traditional targeting solutions are failing. Our weapons systems were designed to track capital ships, not insects. Jessica Thompson's voice cut through their command frequencies again. You know what's funny about insects, Commander? They get everywhere. In your walls, under your floor, inside your crystalline lattice structure. As if to emphasize her point, a human vessel no larger than a shuttle phased directly through the flagship's bridge viewport. The pilot, visible for just a moment, actually waved at Zexthal before disappearing into the ship's superstructure. Moments later, the entire weapons control deck reported catastrophic failures. They're learning, the science officer realized with horror. Each disabled ship gives them new data about our structural weaknesses. They're adapting their attack frequencies in real time. In her tiny cockpit, Captain Rodriguez led her wing through the crystalline corridors of what had once been the Cortaxians' proudest dreadnought. Remember, she broadcast to her squad, "We're not here to destroy. We're here to dismantle. Hit their systems like surgeons, not butchers." The human ships moved like quantum ghosts through the massive vessel's structure. Their engines sang at precisely calculated frequencies, creating resonance patterns that turned the crystalline hull into a massive tuning fork. Systems failed not from direct damage, but from sympathetic vibrations that disrupted the very molecular structure of Cortaxian technology. Back on his failing flagship, Zexthal watched his mighty fleet succumb to death by 1,000 cuts. Ships that could have laid waste to entire star systems were being systematically dissected by vessels he would have once considered too small to be escape pods. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "we're detecting quantum signature buildups throughout the fleet. They're using our own ships as amplifiers. The humans are turning our entire battle group into a massive resonance chamber." The truth hit Zexthal like a physical blow. Humanity hadn't built bigger ships because they'd never needed to. They'd looked at the universe's obsession with size and gone in the opposite direction. While the Cortaxians had built their civilization around being too big to challenge, humans had perfected the art of being too small to stop. "All ships," he broadcast, his voice carrying the first notes of fear, "implement emergency protocol." But before he could finish, his flagship's quantum core began to sing with an alien harmony. Through the crystalline walls, he could hear the sound of humanity's answer to his boast about size. It sounded, he realized with dawning horror, exactly like the buzz of angry hornets in an abandoned nest. The tactical hologram in Yellowstone's command center told a story of exponential devastation. Each disabled Cortaxian vessel became a staging ground for dozens of human ships, which then targeted neighboring vessels in an ever-expanding wave of systematic dismantling. Admiral Thompson watched the pattern spread like a digital virus across the display. "Ma'am," Commander Rivera reported, his eyes fixed on the data streams, "we're seeing a geometric progression in our effectiveness. Each disabled ship is improving our resonance calculations by roughly 17%. The quantum AI is learning their structural weaknesses faster than they can adapt. Jessica allowed herself a small smile. How's that saying go? The more complex the system, the more vulnerable to cascade failure, Rivera finished. And they built their ships like crystalline cities. The Cortaxian fleet's formation was collapsing. Their mighty vessels, each one a masterpiece of crystal engineering, had become their own worst enemies. The quantum harmonics from disabled ships created interference patterns that disrupted nearby vessels' shield frequencies, making them even more vulnerable to human incursion. On the bridge of his flagship, Zexthal watched in horror as his tactical display became a lesson in exponential mathematics. The first wave of human attacks had disabled 10 ships. Those 10 ships became bases for attacks that disabled 60 more. Those 60. Sir, his science officer's voice had lost all composure. We're detecting quantum resonance patterns throughout the fleet. The humans, they're not just using our own ships against us. They're turning our entire battle group into a single, massive quantum conductor. Through the crystalline walls of his command center, Zexthal could hear it, a rising harmonic that made his very form vibrate in sympathy. The sound of thousands of tiny quantum drives, perfectly tuned to the resonant frequency of Cortaxian crystal technology, creating a symphony of destruction. Target their command center, he ordered desperately. They must have a central control node coordinating these attacks. Captain Rodriguez couldn't help but laugh as she heard the order broadcast across the Cortaxian command channels. Her tiny ship, currently phase-shifted inside the power distribution network of a Cortaxian cruiser, was completely autonomous, like every other vessel in Earth's fleet. They still don't get it, she broadcast to her wing. They think we're drones. Can't imagine ships this small having actual pilots. Their loss, her wingman replied as they quantum shifted through another crystal matrix, their engines leaving hairline fractures in critical power conduits. Though I gotta say, doing this manually is a hell of a lot more fun than letting an AI take all the credit. Back in the hive, Admiral Thompson watched as the mathematics of their victory played out across the tactical display. The Cortaxian fleet, for all its size and power, was discovering a fundamental truth about complex systems. The bigger they are, the more points of failure they contain. Admiral, a sensor operator called out, we're detecting power spikes in the enemy flagship. They're trying to reconfigure their crystal matrix to block our quantum frequencies. Jessica nodded, having expected this. Send in the Yellow Jacket squadrons. Show them what happens when you try to change the rules mid-game. Across the solar system, hundreds of specialized human vessels broke from their attack patterns. These ships, equipped with experimental quantum resonators, began generating interference patterns that turned the Cortaxians' defensive adaptations against them. Like a precisely tuned opera singer shattering a wine glass, they found the exact frequency it would turn crystalline strength into crystalline fragility. Impossible, Zexthal whispered as he watched his fleet's attempts at adaptation become another vector of attack. We are the Cortaxian Empire. We have conquered systems. Our ships block out suns. And that, Jessica's voice cut through his ship's failing communications, is exactly why you're losing. You built your empire on being too big to fail, never realizing that bigger just means more ways to fall apart. Here's another Earth saying for you, Commander. Pride cometh before a fall. And you're about to have a very, very long way to fall. The harmonic resonance reached a crescendo, and across the solar system, the mighty Cortaxian fleet began to sing its own death song. High Commander Zexthal stood before his shattered bridge viewport, watching helplessly as another wing of his fleet succumbed to the human swarm. The crystalline surface of his command center was webbed with fractures, each one humming with the harmonic frequencies that had turned his mighty armada into a self-destructing symphony. Status, he demanded, though his voice had lost its earlier arrogance. Now it rang with the hollow tone of breaking crystal. 70% of the fleet is gone, sir, his tactical officer reported, his own crystalline form dulled with defeat. Not destroyed, disabled. The humans are systematically shutting down every system, preserving the crews but rendering our ships inert. It's almost like they're performing surgery. Through the fractured displays, Zexthal watched the horrifying elegance of humanity's attack pattern. Their tiny ships moved like quantum particles, appearing and disappearing throughout his fleet structure. Each incursion was precisely calculated, each disabled system another note in their devastating harmony. "Sir," his science officer's panic cut through the rising hum of failing systems. "They'd deciphered the resonant frequency of our biological forms. Our bodies. They're crystalline-based, just like our ships." For the first time in his centuries of command, Zexthal felt true fear. His own form began to vibrate, each facet of his crystalline body singing in sympathy with the human quantum drives. He watched in horror as small fractures began to appear in its hands, spreading like ice across a pond. "All remaining ships," he broadcast, his voice cracking like stressed crystal, "initiate final protocol. Convert all mass to energy. Take these insects with us." In her cockpit, Captain Rodriguez received the transmission and smiled grimly. "Right on schedule," she muttered, signaling her wing. Admiral Thompson called it. They'd rather destroy themselves than admit defeat. Throughout the solar system, the remaining Cortaxian vessels began to glow with building energy. Their crystalline structures vibrated at frequencies that threatened to tear reality itself apart as they prepared to convert their entire mass into pure destructive force. "Now, Admiral," Commander Rivera asked in the hive, watching the energy readings spike to apocalyptic levels. Admiral Thompson nodded, her expression grim but satisfied. "Now, show them the true price of underestimating Earth's insects." Across the battlefield, Earth's fleet executed their final maneuver. The quantum drives of thousands of tiny ships synchronized, creating a containment field that no one, not even the Cortaxians, had believed possible from vessels so small. The combined quantum signatures formed a lattice of energy that trapped the Cortaxian ships in bubbles of warped spacetime. What is this?" Zexthal demanded as he felt his flagship's mass conversion stall. No fleet of this size could generate enough power to. "Size," Jessica's voice cut through every remaining channel, "isn't everything, Commander. Your ships are big enough to convert their mass to energy." "Impressive. Our ships are small enough to manipulate the quantum fabric of space itself. We're not containing your energy. We're redirecting it into subspace." The scene that followed would be remembered across the galaxy for centuries. As the Cortaxian ships tried to self-destruct, their released energy was caught in quantum nets woven by humanity's microfleet. The power that should have devastated the solar system instead created an aurora of impossible beauty, dancing through subspace in harmless waves of crystalline light. On his failing bridge, Zexthal watched his final gambit transform into a light show. His own body continued to crack, each resonant frequency from the human ships finding new weaknesses in his crystalline form. But they never pushed hard enough to shatter him, just enough to ensure he could no longer fight. "How?" he whispered, his voice carrying across the quantum frequencies. "How did we not see this coming?" "Because," Jessica responded, her voice almost gentle now, "you built your civilization around being too big to fail. But Earth learned long ago that nature's deadliest forces often come in the smallest packages: viruses, bacteria, insects. Sometimes, Commander, the best way to win isn't to be bigger. It's to be smarter, faster, and yes, smaller." Around him, his mighty flagship continued to crack, each crystalline panel a testament to the folly of believing that size alone meant strength. Mass conversion cascade failing across all remaining vessels. "Sir," the science officer reported, his crystalline form now webbed with fractures like a broken mirror. "The humans, they're containing the energy release in quantum bubbles, redirecting it into subspace through some kind of synchronized field effect." Zexthal watched helplessly as his desperate final strategy transformed into a spectacular failure. The combined energy of his self-destructing fleet, enough power to scour a solar system clean of life, was being caught and channeled like water through a sieve by vessels he had dismissed as insignificant. "Show me," he commanded, his voice resonating with the harmonic frequencies that had doomed his mighty armada. The failing holographic display revealed the full scope of humanity's victory. Thousands of tiny ships moved in perfect synchronization, their quantum drives creating a lattice of interconnected fields that trapped and redirected the apocalyptic energies of his dying fleet. The result was beautiful and terrifying, a dance of light and power that painted the solar system in crystalline auroras. In her cockpit, Captain Rodriguez guided her wing through the final phase of containment. Like catching lightning in a bottle, she broadcast to her squadron, "Remember your training. Match your quantum frequencies precisely. One mistake, and we'll have a real light show on our hands." The human vessels moved with impossible precision, adjusting their positions microscopically to account for the massive energy flows. Each ship acted as a node in a vast quantum network, working together to ensure the Cortaxian fleet's death throes wouldn't take half the solar system with them. Energy containment at 98%, Commander Rivera reported from the hive. "The quantum AI confirms all subspace channels are stable. We're successfully bleeding off their convergent energy into harmless radiation." Admiral Thompson nodded, watching the tactical display as it tracked the cascade of failing Cortaxian ships. Status of their crews: "Alive," Rivera confirmed. "Our resonance attacks were precisely calibrated. Their crystalline biology is compromised enough to prevent resistance, but not enough to cause permanent damage. Medical teams are standing by for evacuation procedures." Across the battlefield, the mighty Cortaxian fleet hung in space like a garden of broken glass. Their massive ships, once gleaming with power and arrogance, now drifted powerless as their final attempt at destruction was turned into a harmless light show by the very vessels they had mocked. "Admiral," a communications officer called out, "we're receiving surrender signals from multiple Cortaxian vessels. Their command structure is breaking down. Individual ship captains are requesting terms." Inside his failing flagship, Zexthal felt the last of his pride crack like his crystalline form. The humans had not just defeated his fleet, they had done so with a precision and mercy that made his own actions seem brutish and primitive in comparison. "This is High Commander Zexthal," he broadcast, his voice carrying the resonant tones of damaged crystal. "To all remaining Cortaxian vessels, stand down. Cancel mass conversion protocols. Accept human containment procedures." The response came not from his fleet, but from the swarm of tiny ships that had brought low the mighty Cortaxian armada. "Surrender accepted," Jessica's voice carried across all frequencies. "Medical evacuation teams are en route. Commander Zexthal, I suggest you prepare your crew for transfer. Your flagship's crystalline structure has about 30 minutes before total structural failure." As if to emphasize her point, another crack appeared in the bridge viewport, spreading like ice across a frozen lake. Through it, Zexthal could see the human vessels continuing their precise dance, containing and redirecting the last remnants of his fleet's failed mass conversion. "How many?" he asked, knowing Jessica would understand the question. "0 casualties," she replied, her voice carrying a note of pride. "On either side. We learned long ago that the true measure of victory isn't in how many you kill, but in how many you save, even from themselves." Around them, the solar system continued to dance with crystalline light as humanity's quantum fleet completed their containment procedures. It was, Zexthal realized, perhaps the most beautiful defeat in the history of space warfare. And somewhere in that light show was a lesson about the true nature of size, strength, and significance that the galaxy would not soon forget. The massive doors of Yellowstone's command center slid open with a pneumatic hiss, admitting the crystalline form of High Commander Zexthal. His once proud body, now webbed with stabilized fractures that caught and reflected the room's light, was escorted by 2 human guards who barely reached his midsection. Admiral Jessica Thompson stood waiting, her 5'4" frame somehow managing to dominate the space despite being dwarfed by both the alien commander and the massive tactical displays surrounding them. The holographic screens still showed the aftermath of battle, disabled Cortaxian ships being systematically evacuated by human medical teams, their crystalline hulls slowly crumbling into spectacular clouds of prismatic dust. "Your evacuation procedures are impressive," Zexthal admitted, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance of stressed crystal. 90,000 crew members rescued in under 2 hours, with ships that could fit in our cargo holds. "Sometimes," Jessica replied, "being small means you can get exactly where you need to be." She gestured to a nearby display showing human rescue ships phasing through crystalline hulls to reach trapped crew members. When you're not obsessed with size, you find solutions others might miss. Commander Rivera approached with a quantum tablet, its display showing the formal surrender documentation. "All Cortaxian vessel crews have been successfully transferred to medical stations throughout the solar system," he reported. "Our crystalline biology specialists are already working on stabilizing their condition." Zexthal's faceted eyes studied the human officers around him. "You knew," he said finally. "You knew our biology was crystalline-based. Knew our ship's weaknesses. This was never a battle. It was a demonstration." "We've been studying your empire for decades," Jessica confirmed, bringing up archived footage of Cortaxian ships conducting similar intimidation displays against other species. "Always the same pattern. Show up with moon-sized ships, demand surrender, mock any civilization that hadn't built massive fleets. We decided to try something different. By building ships too small to be taken seriously." Zexthal's tone carried a mix of bitterness and reluctant admiration. "While we focused on being too big to challenge, you perfected the art of being too small to stop." "There's an old Earth story," Jessica said, walking to a viewport that showed the crystalline aurora still dancing through the solar system, "about a shepherd boy who defeated a giant with nothing but a sling and a stone. The giant had armor, weapons, massive strength. The boy had accuracy, speed, and the understanding that sometimes the biggest target is the easiest to hit." She turned back to face the alien commander. "Your empire built itself around the idea that bigger means better. That strength comes from size. But Earth's history taught us different lessons. Our deadliest predators are often microscopic. Our most powerful weapons work at the atomic scale. We learned that true power isn't about how big you can be. It's about how effectively you can apply the strength you have." Around them, the tactical displays showed the final phases of the cleanup operation. Human ships, still dwarfed by the crystalline wreckage they navigated, continued their precise work of containment and rescue. The Cortaxian fleet, which had arrived to demand Earth's surrender, now served as a glittering monument to the folly of underestimating a smaller opponent. "The surrender documents are ready," Rivera announced, offering the quantum tablet to Zexthal. The alien commander's crystalline hand shook slightly as he reached for the device. "In all our history," he said quietly, "no species has ever—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Your victory was not just in defeating us, but in how you chose to do it. No casualties, no destruction beyond what was necessary. Even now, your medical teams treat our injured with the same care as they would their own." Jessica smiled. "Another lesson Earth learned long ago, Commander. The true measure of victory isn't in how thoroughly you can destroy your enemy. It's in how much you can preserve while still achieving your objective." As Zexthal signed the surrender documents, the last light of his fleet's failed mass conversion painted the command center in crystalline rainbows. It was, perhaps, a fitting end. Beauty born from the moment, an empire learned that true significance had nothing to do with size at all.